one email can throw you off. One phone call can derail the whole day, outcomes from a meeting or whatever it might be from a working perspective, let alone from a competency perspective when you talk in the built environment, where, as we know, so many people are involved in a singular project. And as you said, that is so spread out across not just one organization, but multiple working together. Things like this are critical.
Complete common sense from start to finish. But I wonder how much of the kind of purpose and scope and planning stuff happens, and how much of the auditing and review process happens, and how often do we just steam in headlong into something because we've done this before, we've got experience, it feels like it's within our wheelhouse to do so, or it's just pressing and I don't feel I have the time to sit and plan this out and therefore go. And again, it's just because it's so front of mind that the product regulation stuff that's coming down and CCPI, there is so much of that establishing competence criteria. It's a huge, huge part of it, organizationally and within the context of particular products and systems. My hunch is that pretty soon, while this stuff is now best practice and voluntary and then people are being handheld into the process, I don't know how long that's going to hold.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with Adobe Acrobat.
Peter Sumpton, there's a lot happening at the minute. Obviously, local elections last week, a bit of a landslide for reform, and all of the questions that's thrown up for central government. We've got hopefully what looks like the start of a peace process of some sort in Ukraine, which would be massive, as well as slightly floundering talks in the Middle East to try and draw that to a close. And obviously, that would have massive implications for the construction sector if that were to wrap up sooner rather than later. But I want to start with the big question of how's the garden looking?
Absolutely. Yeah. I was going to say, we're going to cover none of that in today's episode, and we're going to focus on the core things. And as we know, it's springtime and it's a critical time for everyone's garden, which if you're not out in the wind, the rain or the sun, you need to get yourself out there and look after those little seeds and make sure they're germinating correctly. But it's looking all right, to be honest. We did some de-weeding at the weekend, which was fun because it was sunny. So you don't really care as long as it's sunny. But yeah, it's good. What about yours?
It's okay. I'm kind of getting over it now, to be honest, mate. The initial burst of enthusiasm is completely gone when the reality's hit that this isn't a one-off job that you can just kind of pat yourself on the back for and then forget about. So yeah, it's becoming a labour of love more than anything else. But yeah, it could be worse. It could be the economy. We could be the people responsible for having to solve all that stuff. But I think we've got three nice sort of distraction stories this week, haven't we, as much as anything else? So again, as last week, no big sort of policy stuff to get through, no big economic pieces to pull apart. Just what I hope are three sort of deep dive stories that people may have missed, actually, of the sort of distraction and big headlines of last week. So yeah, hopefully people get some new stuff out of this as well.
Yeah, I think they will. Just on that point, that's your garden is very similar to this podcast. I feel, we thought it was going to be a one episode, and away we go, job done, and it has certainly turned into a labour of love, come wind, rain or shine. So we're here. Right, yeah. Let's get into it, shall we? And let's start with something from construction management, which is part of the CIOB. And this is all about the acronym heavy straight away, which
I thought this is made for you with the number of acronyms in here. I thought you'd love this one.
Yeah, so this is the ITFG publishing a built environment competency guide, which is the Industry Task and Finish Group, which is fantastic in itself, lovely acronym. And this really piqued interest because it's off the back of Building Safety Act. Couple of more acronyms, if you will indulge me. So it's putting the ICC, the Industry Competency Committee's 15 principles of competence management into practice. And this is to help pretty much everybody, but we're talking more focused at leadership because this is an 88-page detailed document, but it also advises building safety regulators and the entire industry with a particular focus, as you can imagine, on high-risk buildings. I haven't gone into depth in terms of reading the actual guide, I must admit, but with the help of Adobe Acrobat and its AI assistant, I've had a quick debrief in what it covers, and it goes into so much detail. So if you want anything to know and understand, and you're looking to know and understand competency, get involved in this. Link in the show notes, and it's well worth a read from what I can see anyway. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, jumping back a step slightly, because this is another one of those things born out of Grenfell. Essentially, it's for all the government. I think was it 70% of recommendations from Hackett report and the inquiry that they've implemented now. So yes, it's the ICC and the competency stuff that has been there for a little while. It's another one of those things that we seem to talk about every week, actually, that I think as a sector, as much as we can be a bit of a talking shop sometimes, we're getting better, I think, at connecting trade bodies and professional bodies with industry, with people on the ground to sort of take a bit more of a pragmatic view as to how these things are applied. And that's what I like about this. I mean, I'd be interested to sort of hear what Adobe has thrown up with its recommendations. But effectively, the 15 principles have been there for some time. And they're all for anyone that's involved in project management to any degree, not just within construction and wholesale necessarily, but project management more generally. The principles kind of are what they are and make sense. And if they were followed every time in kind of sequential order, then hey, you've probably got a really solid competence framework there that is universally applicable. I think what's really useful about this is how prescriptive it is for SMEs. We say it every week. I feel that we're such an SME and micro business heavy sector that these things can't feel like we're talking over the heads of the vast majority of people. For the larger brands in the sector, whether they're contractors, manufacturers, or merchants, whatever the case may be, they've probably got teams of people, or at the very least one person responsible for taking that holistic view of competence and working these things through. We work with a lot of manufacturer clients on CCPI at the minute. We've been looking a lot at what's coming down the track with legislation from a product regulation point of view, and competence is going to be at the heart of that. It's not just going to be declarations of performance or and material testing and so on. It is going to be a lot about who is technically capable within your organization to have sign off on and have a view on these things. And yeah, while that's much easier to do for a larger organization that can either throw existing resource or can hire in someone to do this sort of stuff. I love how granular this gets with examples. So 88 pages, it's a bit of a beast, but I think it needs to be. And I think if people use it maybe as a reference guide as they're developing frameworks in the first place, or again, I'm looking at some of the within the 15 things here. There's things on monitoring competence, on dealing with external stakeholders, and so on. Managing subcontractor competence is a massive one for our sector, which is subcontractor dominated. Wherever these issues do arise, I think handy to have a very detailed resource and some practical guidance on how to apply these things. So, useful to follow the process in a linear sort of structured way, but equally handy to have a resource that you can keep going back to as and when the need arises. So that was my big takeaway from it. Is just, there's a lot there, but there probably needs to be. There's a lot of practical application within there as well.
And if you look at going back to ICC and the 15 principles, it follows that structure, it follows that framework. It goes into a lot more detail, like you were saying. But if you just look at the 15 principles in isolation, it looks like no-brainers. You could read them, you could list them and just think, oh, well, of course, you're going to decide processes and methods. You're going to develop competencies, assign responsibilities, monitor those competencies, etc., etc. But that in the real life, we know that isn't how it works. Your own life, it's all well and good having an agenda or what you're going to do this today or this week or whatever it might be. God knows I love an agenda. But one email can throw you off, one phone call can derail the whole day, outcomes from a meeting or whatever it might be from a working perspective, let alone from a competency perspective when you talk in the built environment. Where, as we know, so many people are involved in a singular project. And as you said, that is so spread out across not just one organization, but multiple working together. So things like this are critical. What I'll do as well is I'll put in the show notes a link to a PDF space. So people can actually go in and they can use AI Assistant as well on this document. I'll make it just for this document. And I'm not saying don't read it, but if you want to ask AI Assistant a particular thing that might be in this document or where to find it, it'll pop up with the references of whereabouts it is. So I'll sort that out. And I think 88 pages, that makes it feel more manageable. But please do read it and do your due diligence on particular topics that you're not that familiar with in the whole document.
No, because I think it's a really, really good shot. Again, you've got to meet people where they are. I don't think it's realistic to throw a full 90-page document at someone that is again, we take the micro business side of things, someone that is a skilled tradesperson, but also then has to run a business, understanding, and you and I know how involved that is from an HR point of view, from a finance point of view, and governance and everything else. That's like having two jobs, and then maybe you do a podcast on the side of that as well, just because you've got some spare time that you'd like to fill. But yeah, you can understand how these things just don't happen. Again, to look at the 15 principles, you are absolutely right on the face of it, and in an ideal world, complete common sense from start to finish. But I wonder, yeah, maybe this is projection slightly from we're turning this into therapy now from some of my day job, but how much of the kind of purpose and scope and planning stuff happens, and how much of the auditing and review process happens, and how often do we just steam in headlong into something because we've done this before, we've got experience, it feels like it's within our wheelhouse to do so, or it's just pressing and I've not got the time, I don't feel I have the time to sit and plan this out and therefore go. And again, it's just because it's so front of mind, but with the product regulation stuff that's coming down and CCPI, there is so much of that, establishing competence criteria. It's a huge, huge part of it, organizationally and within the context of particular products and systems. So, my hunch is that pretty soon, while this stuff is now best practice and voluntary and people are being handheld into the process, I don't know how long that's going to hold. I think at a certain point, there will be either an expectation from customer or there will be a legislative sort of imperative to get on top of this stuff. So I would say it's best practice and therefore do it anyway. And I think, again, you've got a little hack there to give people a bit of a leg up. And I think AI is a great way for people to sort of increase the speed of learning on this stuff. But if there is a learning curve, I would get on with it sooner rather than later because, I don't think this is going to be optional for long if it ever was.
Yeah, for sure. Moving on then to our second headline from New Civil Engineer. And it's all about transparency. So transparency in infrastructure needs a business case. And this is how to make it, apparently, by Peter Matthews. Really interesting, quite a short piece, but interesting nonetheless from the perspective of being open and transparent, of which I can understand where he's coming from an infrastructure perspective and it not being as open and transparent. But I'm not going to lead on this, Ryan. I want you to take the lead on this one, if you don't mind.
Not at all. And I think what he's done, it's something I feel like we talk about fairly regularly as well, is what's of interest to your audience, again, in terms of meeting them where they are. Because, again, no brainer, face of it. Of course, we should be transparent on these things. We're not, and we're not to a pretty enormous amount. So he opens his piece with the International Monetary Fund have got an estimate that about a third of countries' infrastructure spend is wasted. Now, again, you and I have talked at length about the size of current infrastructure pipeline and just how important that pipeline is to not just infrastructure and construction, but what that then means for the economy at large and getting these things going. So if we take that sort of little fact as gospel and apply that to where we are currently, that would be 240 billion of waste within our current infrastructure pipeline. And that isn't to talk about the knock-on effects, that kind of pebble in the pond and the ripple effects within local economies and national economy. That is just on delivery of pipelines. So if there's an incentive to even investigate this as an area, I would say that 240 billion is probably, that would focus my attention. So, it's a fascinating piece. Like you say, it's maybe not as in-depth as some of the other first-person sort of features that we've looked at in recent weeks, but I absolutely love it. So basically, there's a new methodology that cost the Infrastructure Transparency Initiative that they pulled together. That basically puts a price tag on transparency, accountability, and participation within infrastructure projects. So they've got this IMF number, but there's also a number of, and they cite several countries within there as sort of test cases that they've looked back on over the years. Thailand was mentioned, 70 million overrun on their infrastructure projects. But yeah, lots of models, lots of data to review. And ultimately, yeah, and because these are such gargantuan projects that take place over years, not only are there lessons learned that can be applied to others, but if you can kind of monitor how that project is performing relative to, we've spoken before about reference class forecasting, how big things get done, just the size of overrun, both in terms of time and budget on several, it's not unique to the UK, but several UK projects. I think Holyrood, was it 800% over budget that got to? So yeah, there are lessons to learn from other people, but one of those that these guys highlight as being a crucial one is that honesty. And we've got a very, very timely example this week in HS2 coming out and sort of holding hands up and saying how wrong they've got their sums. The Birmingham depot is going to be at 3 times the original estimate at £856 million. So you wince. And it's not a fun headline. It's not a good one for them. It's not a good one for the sector. I've said to you before, Pete, that HS2 should have been one of those flagship projects that the sector could shout about, in looking to attract new talent and new investment and so on. So yeah, that you can understand where the temptation for a lack of transparency would come from, that we don't need this kind of negative headline, bury this in this report that no one's ever going to read. But yeah, if we're ever going to improve, and like I say, 240 billion is a decent reason to improve, then yeah, I think HS2 have done exactly the right thing this week per the outlines of this report, in holding their hands up, in owning it, and in putting steps in place to ensure that there aren't further kind of cost overruns. So I'll get off my soapbox and ask you what you think now. But yeah, I think it's a very, very obvious thing on the face of it, but clearly something we're not doing enough of. And yeah, there's a pretty large prize to win at the end of this if we do get it right.
Yeah, it's another. There's another focus here on like high power. This is focused on like a government level, big projects. And what Peter actually says is that most of this inefficiency and money that's lost is down to mismanagement and corruption, which makes me think of our big shop every week. That usually comes in over budget, takes way too much time. It's very mismanaged, and there's a little bit of corruption going on there. I must admit, but in all seriousness, it's like, whatever isn't managed, it doesn't get measured. Sorry, other way around, flip reverse that. Whatever isn't measured doesn't get managed. It's the same thing here. And when you're talking on like a global scale, you mentioned Thailand, Uganda as well. Just the number of bid tenders has increased from 2 to like 12.5, which obviously there's more transparency, there's better competition going on there, which is fantastic. Had a quick look at some of the projects that have overrun, and if you think if we were to reduce this spend, how much additional budget we'd have, particularly within the built environment. So you've got Lower Thames Crossing, 3.5 billion. HS2, it's estimated 56. Transpennine Railway, it was under by 300 million. But it says, and this is AI, apologies, but this is AI from Gemini Google, current costs have ballooned to over 10 billion. Scottish Parliament, like you said, absolutely. Hinkley Point, 4-year delay. And I think the one that always sticks out for me is the Elizabeth line. So that was 4 billion over budget and 3.5 to 4 years slightly behind what they were when it was supposed to open. Yeah, you've got COVID and things to potentially throw in for some of those, but still, you start to add all that up. It's a pretty penny that could be reinvested back into the industry, which, let's face it, that you could invest it in so many different places. Skill shortages being one, and technology being another, and both of those, if we were to invest a little bit more, probably could solve quite a lot of the industry's problems. or go some way to solving them. So, good on them, good on cost for doing this, and good on cost for having a fantastic acronym of upper and lowercase letters as well.
No, I'm with you. And just to say on that, I think it's bigger than just the industry as well, Pete. If you, again, not to get too embroiled in sort of politics at large, but all I've heard this week off the back of Starmer's speech is, this needs a reset, this needs a new story, this needs it's bigger than just spreadsheets and data, which is slight irony given what we're talking about. But delivering on infrastructure absolutely could be. And most people generally, I would guess, in the public at large, aren't as nerdy as you and I are about these things. But the economic case for getting this right, as I said before, not just because these projects are valuable in and of themselves, but because of the knock-on effects. I watched something yesterday about the implications for upgrading the grid in order to then build data centers, and then the economic argument on from there. It's massive. Honestly, it's such a huge opportunity. I do think there's a moral, a commercial, and a societal imperative to get this stuff right. So, and I absolutely take your point. But I would hope that we don't have the same sorts of corruption maybe that the other countries experience, and therefore the benefits of infrastructure transparency aren't perhaps the same here as elsewhere. But I do think there is something in we clearly have a problem with project overruns. There's you've reeled off a list of projects there, and I can think of several others as well. So yeah, even if we only take one lesson from this and apply it, if maybe it doesn't say losses of a third, but if it claws back some of that, we're still just because of the size of the sums of money involved, we're still talking huge amounts that could do a lot of societal good. So I do hope there's lessons learned and applied from that, because something has to give.
Yeah, there's got to be. In any way we can save money, and not just save money, but be more efficient in this industry. Then, long may it continue having that focus.
Well, if we're talking efficiency, might be a good time to have a little word from our partner, Adobe Acrobat. I know you're kind of Mr. Adobe, and I've been sort of partnering with them for some time now. But I've been trying to get my head into things. A lot of my time looking at AI with my role at SLG. We've had our annual Horizon report, and for anyone that hasn't engaged with that previously, it's a bit of a beast. It's we've done it for 4 years now. It's grown every year, so loads of data points anyway, but it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And one of the things that we tried to do this year, because we've got a little bit of historic data now, is to not only analyze all the data for this year, but analyze it comparatively for previous years as well. And it's a nightmare job, if I'm honest, Pete, especially for someone like me, because that previously would have been spreadsheets, it would have been a lot of maths, it would have been a lot of me going cross-eyed. And I haven't had to do that. Honestly, it's been a massive help with AI Assistant. To be able to put all of that data into one place, to have it not only find me median points in that, so I've got some comparisons to make, but some really, really insightful observations and sort of further questions for me. So it still needs human. It still needs someone that understands the subject matter well enough to be able to interpret data and work with. Yeah, some of the insights it's been able to pull, I've been really, really impressed with. And again, not just saying that from a partnership point of view. So if you've got something that's very data heavy, or something that requires a lot of time to go in and compare and contrast, there's a huge time saver there that I think you'll really enjoy. So yeah, I'd encourage everyone to go and give that a go.
Final headline here, which is bit of a tangent, to be perfectly honest, but something we've covered, or certainly very familiar with. This is historic buildings, and trying to restore them to former glories, or make sure they're here for the next generation. And in this instance, from building.co.uk, making sure Blenheim Palace is fit for the next 300 years, which sounds a bit ambitious. One thing that caught my eye straight away from this piece, which we'll get into, was the fact that very early on in the piece that they mention that a stone cannonball detached from the frieze high up on the building in Woodstock, Oxfordshire, and landed on the steps below. So if that's not a warning that your roof needs some kind of looking out, or the building is crumbling a little bit, then a stone cannonball falling from it is usually a really good sign,
happens all the time around here, mate. I said, honestly, we have nightmares with it. So yeah, sympathise. It's a tricky one.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't land in your garden. You don't want it, anywhere but the grass.
No, exactly that, exactly that.
Yes.
But
So
what a tricky job, though. I mean, I was kind of having a look through it, and I'd recommend anyone that has even a passing interest in, the built environment. Why would you not, if you're listening to this podcast to this point? But yeah, anyone listening to this, I would implore you, go and have a look at this in building, because if nothing else, the photos are incredible. I mean, of course, Blenheim's beautiful, but the scale of the refurb job, and what a tricky project as well. Not just because of the high stakes, how loved this building is, and how beautiful, and how well preserved it needs to be. But there's a fixed budget, there's a fixed deadline. The place is it's a commercial premises as well. It's used for films. It's used for sporting events. A lot of visitor footfall. Christmas is a hugely busy period, so this all needs to be wrapped up and out of here. I read in there was deals with like film studios and others that were really unhappy because they wanted these big, expansive sort of exterior shots, and when's the scaffolding going to be up and not. So a fascinating project. And yeah, the building has to be accessible throughout. Again, so last month, a couple of weeks back, we were talking about the potential options for Westminster, and for how the palace might be looked after there. I obviously mentioned the town hall at Manchester. They opted to close the building in order to kind of blast through the work as quickly as possible. Not an option at Blenheim, because it generates revenue year round. This is all. It's all had to go on while the public's been there. I don't know if you want to pick up from there, Pete, because some of the things they've done to actually incorporate the refurb work into the visitor experience were actually quite cool.
yeah, and that's. I mean, there's loads of stuff. We could talk about this probably for a few hours. To be fair, and it is a long, detailed piece, and rightly so. So please go and check it out, because it does go into detail about why they're doing what they're doing, and how they're doing. And it's not a case of just erecting scaffolding and fixing the roofing. As with any old building, they want to try and keep it like for like as much as they possibly can. They need to be delicate around certain areas and facets of the building, but and like you said, Ryan, it's typical Hollywood, isn't it? It's like, no, we just want to use it. We need this. We need this visually stunning. It's like, I'm not bothered if it falls down in the next 2 years. I just I need it for this film. Then it's fine. But yeah, it's used for filming and loads of different things. So and this is not a cheap project. 12 million restoration. Apologies, I'll get the name in a minute, but the lead on this, Kelly O'Driscoll, head of Built Heritage at Blenheim Palace, basically adamant that it's going to be on time
Yeah.
and on budget. Like, no, there's no compromise there, which is great to see. That's in the front of mind. So they're thinking, okay, so this is blocking out a lot of what makes Blenheim Palace beautiful, and we're seeing a lot of return visitors, but not many new visitors come in. So how can we add this into the attraction? And they've actually opened it up so you climb up the scaffolding safely. It's all enclosed, but you climb up the scaffolding, and they've opened up viewing
Mm.
platforms so you can see the external into the gardens, but also the internal looking at the external of the roof, if that makes sense. So you're viewing the building work that's going on as part of your experience of going there, and just to have that thought to add that into it is just a really nice touch, because the intricacies, even of putting the scaffolding up, which took them 6 months
Mm.
at a cost of 1.7 million, even things like that isn't as simple as it sounds,
Yeah.
because they've got very delicate walls. Most of the interiors are void, so there's loads of chimneys and things in it that you don't see from the outside. So they can't put much pressure on that. So they had to work out ways that they could structure the scaffolding just so they could do the work, let alone have all these stipulations about where they can do work and how they can do work, so they don't do any more damage to what's already there. So it's not a simple project by any means, and to have such a tight deadline on it is even more dramatic and I suppose entertaining in that are they going to get this done, and they say they're going to in time for what they class as probably the most important period, which is Christmas, because of what they do at the palace and the visitors they get, which generates more money so they can keep the palace running. Yeah, it's fantastic. Have you got any more insights, or have I missed any detail that the listeners need to know about?
I don't think so. I mean, just to go back, the incorporation of that, come and see the works within the visitor experience, I think, yeah, is absolutely genius. I would guess that the kinds of person that would be interested in visiting the palace to look at the work anyway, to actually see craftspeople in their element doing that job, because you're absolutely right. I mean, some of the decorative work, particularly, it's, with respect to any jobbing sort of DIYer or jobbing sort of painter and decorator listening to this isn't just go and slap on some emulsion. It's high level craft. There are only a few people that can undertake this kind of work in the world. So to actually go and observe that, I'm kind of jealous that I haven't been, because I think that would be fascinating to watch anyway. So it turns something that could be, a bit of a pain in the backside for some people, that, my visit to Blenheim, what I had in my mind, I now can't experience X or Y or Z. I can't see the full exterior of the building in all of its glory. Well, no, not this time, but you can get something that is truly unique and that won't be here in a year or two once the work is complete. So I thought that was genius. The one thing that kind of stuck out with me is that, as much as this is it is a heritage project and things need to be restored, this isn't kind of knock down and build new or anything close to. But the idea that the climate change is a factor in this isn't just a heritage project. It's one that has an eye on the future. And it took me back at the start of my career within construction. Did a lot of work in sort of water management and civil engineering and so on. So to hear people talking about 1 in 500 year storm events, again, not to get on my high horse again for the fourth or fifth time in this episode, but the frequency of these, what are meant to be kind of generational or longer storm events, that we're having several of those a year now, and that's the main reason that they cite for the roof being in the state that it's in, is it's imperative that all buildings sadly allow for this stuff. But I thought that was an interesting thing, that this isn't just a look how beautiful this building is. It has to be robust. It has to incorporate modern materials and modern methods where appropriate to do so. And getting that balance right is crucial, not just to making it as beautiful as it can be, but also as resilient as it can be. So, but yeah, I love it. What an amazing project, and yeah, one that if it's not too late, I might try and find an excuse to get down there, because I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that project in action, so to speak.
And it's mad that you're talking like that, because any other project, you'd be, I'll give it a miss until it's fully restored, so I can see it in all its glory. And now you kind of want to go, because you can see the actual work being done close up as well. You don't get that many opportunities to do that. One thing that caught my attention as I was reading it, and you kind of almost do a double take, is that usually with these projects, something comes out of it, and or they create something that's different, or they have to reinvent something. And they've reinvented a gel, or created a solvent gel as a cleaning method for the paintings internally, because we can't forget the internal of the building. Some of the paintings that are hundreds of years old, they were actually leaking, and water was leaking through them. I mean, that's just crazy to think that happens. But yeah, they created a new solvent gel that's helping clean that. That was supported by a 1.1 million grant. But the thing that really caught my eye was the I'm going to get this wrong. So the lichens on the stonework. So they found 70 species of lichens. Yeah, I thought it was one. So there's 70 species. But the thing that was really great to see was that apologies, let me get her name correctly. Because I'm terrible at names and I always forget them. So Kelly O'Driscoll, and what she said was, we have a lichenologist at Oxford University who is very precious about our lichens. And I just thought that was fantastic, that they've gone down to that granular detail, that it's not just, oh, we'll just clean these buildings, get a new roof, repair the rotten wood. You're looking at these things in that much detail to try and preserve as much as you possibly can. on time and on budget is just phenomenal. Great work.
100% agree. So what's your takeaway for this week?
I mean, you can go so many, can't you? But I think I'm going to go with a mixture here, and that is competency, and don't take it for granted. And you look at what's happening at Blenheim Palace, and competency in a different respect, but the competency and the detail that they have gone into to make sure that they're doing this right, on time, on budget, with really, really specifics. Going back to the lichens, but really, really specifics on everything they're doing is really, really commendable. So, yeah, it's competency, and just don't take it for granted.
Yeah, no, it's a really good shout. I'm going to go back to the first story really on competency, but also finding help and support and shortcuts where you can. For a lot of people listening to this, that will run businesses doing various things within the construction supply chain. As I said during that piece, that you've got a trade and a skill, and your kind of your day job, and then you've also got the job of running a business as well. And this is where AI comes into its own, as you say, Pete. So yeah, there are a lot of very dense reports that are out there. There'll be even more coming down the track as the legislation change continues. We've been through a lot in the last few years with Building Safety Act, with all of the other Grenfell recommendations. There's not an excuse not to stay on top of things. The tools are out there now to help you summarize those things and find sort of ways to apply them into your role. So yeah, definitely make use of those technologies where they're available. And in selfish plug time, anyone with a passing interest in AI that's attending Future Build or UK Construction Week, if you're hearing this on the Wednesday, I'll be part of a panel discussion this afternoon over at the procurement and marketing stage at 2:30 on AI and sort of how it's keeping marketers particularly awake at night. So yeah, be lovely to meet you. So come across and yeah, we'll do our best to keep that interesting for you.
And if you are going today, what a great traveling companion this podcast episode has been for you. That's what we do. We deliver. And speaking of which, I think for the rest of the week, I'm going to sit down and try and uncover the 20 to 30,000 known species of lichen that are worldwide. So next week, I'll be counting them up and down for you, the different variants and species and where you can find them.
I'm sure you'll all enjoy that. So set your alarms, kids, because that one will be out next Wednesday.
So we'll see you for that.
Until then, bye bye.